Hi, I'm Danny Black, and welcome to the @SportsBalt podcast. On this podcast, I will be talking sports cards, collectibles, memorabilia. I'll be interviewing hobby guests. I will be talking about my own thoughts. I'll cover regular sports that relate to the hobby. That's the fun part. More importantly, I want you along for the ride. So click like and follow for more content, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Well, hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Sports Ball Podcast. I am still Danny Black, and today I've got a cool guest with me. I was reading an article in Sports Collectors Daily, and it really resonated with me. And so I started researching the writer and the author of the article, and I've came to find Horacio Ruiz, and he's going to be joining me in a second, and just some really fascinating articles that he's written, as well as a lot of podcasts. So when you see him and get to hear him, I encourage you to check out his work because we're certainly only going to touch the tip of the iceberg today. So with that being said, welcome, Horacio.
Danny, thank you for having me on. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I reached out to you when you wrote an article talking about the vintage market as far as the grading at the end of the year with the gem rate grading reports. Just as a summary, kind of what was your perspective on the vintage market coming out of that report?
Yeah, we were kind of Rich and I. We kind of go back and forth with these ideas. Rich Miller, he's the creator of Sports Collectors Daily, and we thought about what would be some good year-end stories, to cap off the card, part of the card scene, and we took a look at the vintage market. And we just know that, I know from being on Twitter and kind of seeing the developments there, the vintage market had kind of gotten I won't say a reputation or a perception as this store of value, right? Vintage really came on the scene sort of like in the middle of the year, like July, maybe a little bit before that, June, July, when the modern and ultra modern cards started tanking a little bit. And so it kind of seemed like people were beginning to put their money elsewhere. So I was kind of curious, well, if people are going to be flipping these vintage cards, if they're looking to profit from these vintage cards, naturally the grading must have also increased. And so we contacted Ryan Stuzinski from GemRate, asked him for some data, which he provided some amazing data. And we were able to write this article about really how the grading patterns at PSA, more than anything, more so than any other grading company, in the second half of the year for vintage cards, which we determined to be pre-1970, by the way.
I've done 3 shows on that, so we can have that debate another time.
I saw a couple of that, like what is vintage? Is it okay to label cards vintage, and what does it matter? But I guess pre-1970 was kind of arbitrary. I mean, not gonna lie there, but it seems far away enough to where you're talking about 50-year-old cards, right? So, but in any case, like the PSA really saw a huge influx in the second half of the year. Part of that naturally can be attributed to them lowering their prices,
sure,
significantly. And without a doubt, there were probably a lot of people sitting on some nice cards that they wanted to send in and were waiting for the right time. But I think that there were some other factors there.
Well, I'm gonna, as somebody who does a little bit of PSA registry collecting, I will say every time they drop a Collectors Club price into somewhere where I can get cards for the registry that are not expensive cards, I'm going to be sending them in, and those are not necessarily expensive cards. So I think PSA has this luxury of dictating their business flow simply by adjusting the price a couple dollars up or a couple dollars down. They can manipulate how much business. So I think they have that luxury, and I think when they got caught up on the backup, they can now control it.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I think you've seen, I think they also were ready. People learned as well, right? Like with these modern, ultra modern cards, I think they understood that a lot of people realized that they weren't just going to start sending in any cards and start flipping off of that, and that they're ready for the demand with new graders that they've hired. I know I talked to Ryan about a year ago, and they had, he estimated about a year ago. They had over 100 graders at PSA, which was significantly higher than they had before, and they probably kept hiring a few more. But also that, like you mentioned, I mean, you will be sending in some cards for your PC. You will be sending in some cards that you just want to for part of your collection. But I think collectors have also gotten like wiser. They've gotten a little bit choosier about what they're going to be sending over, and I think PSA is also aware of that. That they're not going to get this massive stuff like they did a couple years ago.
You're right. We're probably not going to see 20,000 Zions ever again. Or let me say, I hope we don't see 20,000 Zions ever again.
Right.
So all that being said, I was just totally fascinated with the theory because I am a vintage collector. And I believe, depending on what index or what numbers you like to use, the vintage market has been down. And I say only compared to almost any other financial market, 3 to 5% in the last 12 months. And I know other people that look at different vintage indexes, and everybody's roughly in that ballpark. No pun intended, but that was kind of funny. So, when you look at that kind of stabilizing force, I'll call it the vintage, where you don't have to ride the waves of the modern. You don't have the pressure to gem every card. That's just not the way the vintage works. It's natural population control. I think, and I've always felt that you graduate to vintage, that you have to really appreciate a lot more of the nuance, and it's not a flip game. And I do think that more people who came in the pandemic, who maybe took a hit on the modern, or learned a lot through the pandemic, are now shifting to vintage post pandemic. Do you think that would be a contributing factor?
Without a doubt. I think like you said. I mean, I think when we get, it depends on the collector, right? So I can speak for myself, right? When I first got into cards, to me, I kind of viewed as vintage as kind of out of reach for whatever reason. And so, you buy the packs that are there, right? You go to your local card shop and you buy what's there. And typically, in most card shops, they offer the latest products. And so you're buying modern, ultra modern cards. But I would say like a couple of years ago, I started looking at some prices for some cards and I was like, whoa, like, I could get some really nice, cool historic cards from the 40s for like a couple of bucks. Yeah. And you really can, they're not going to be in the greatest condition, but it's kind of like your entry, when you realize that you can hold sort of like this iconic thing that, to me, it's iconic because I start thinking about all the people that have held that card over the years, right? From the 1940s on, and now it's my turn to hold it, and I'm kind of the custodian for that card. That's kind of the appeal to me from vintage at the beginning, anyway. And then you kind of start learning more about it. You start being aware of, fakes even, you're like, am I buying, how should I be aware of these fakes? What is a good card? If I'm buying from 48 Bowman, well, what about 50 Bowman? What about 51 Bowman? And then you're like,
some people call it 48, 49 Bowman.
48, 49 Bowman, right? And then you start doing your research on that and you're like, well, why is it 48, 49 Bowman? And it's still sort of unclear, right? So there's sort of a little bit of a mystique there about vintage. I think that as far as it's been described in multiple podcasts, vintage now has taken sort of a role as a store of value, right? Like you said, the population control is pretty much there. Yes, there will be cards found. We just saw this beautiful raw mantle that was found, and recently graded. And you also had these E98 cards that were just graded as well.
But to your point, the condition of those were fantastic, and that is so far the exception rather than the rule in vintage. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand is vintage is not about mint condition. And I think when you're not in vintage, it's a very intimidating thing. You'll hear, 12.6 million, and you see all these cards, and that is not 99% of the vintage world. The vintage world, I mean, I've got cards all around me on my desk here. I mean, these are $10, $20 cards. And I pick up right here. Here's a 57 Larry Doby.
Beautiful.
Right. Beautiful card. Under $20. But I'm working on the 57 set. So, I cherry picked the ones I wanted to have first, because it's a little more fun. But so moving on from the vintage, I'm fascinated in the fact that you also do a podcast looking at all sorts of different investments. And I want to look at the correlation between the hobby world and maybe the macro view of, I guess, some other areas. Are you seeing people in all investment areas a little conservative right now? Did you see, I guess over the last year, kind of similar waves across different investment types?
Yeah. So like you mentioned, I have a podcast there. I do some work with alts.co. If you guys want to check them out as well.
Great podcast, by the way, also.
Thank you very much, Danny. Thank you. So, we've had so many guests, and it's been really, really cool. So you mentioned these alternative investments is what we focus on. And so in the last couple of years, you've had people pop up, and they're doing fractional. The fractional space has gotten huge. So you can own a fraction of a racehorse. You can own a piece of a group of franchises, right? Like restaurants.
Pro sports teams.
Pro sports teams. You can own fractions of pro sports teams. You can even start investing in athletes, like almost as if they were, buying stocks in athletes, kind of funding them, right? Funding their careers. And then you get a payout of their future contracts.
Yep.
It's a really wide open space, and it was thriving. And not to mention cryptocurrency, right? The whole cryptocurrency market there. So up until April, it seemed like, let the good times roll, right? And then the markets just crashed. There's different reasons. People are saying, the printing of money that occurred a couple of years before that, or a year or two before that, really caused inflation to kind of creep its head up. The war in Ukraine, all that stuff started propping up, and that also caused a lot of supply chain issues, and which there are still.
And the hobby's seen that for a year or two. I mean, to be fair, going back to the pandemic, I believe Trevor Lawrence's rookie card comes out in 4 more years. So some of this has translated across everything.
Mac Jones, even the Mac Jones, right? He had like one, mass-produced rookie card, and we had to wait like a year or a year and a half to get the good stuff. So yeah, that was also a big deal. But you saw that a lot of these companies had to kind of scale back on their plans from what they were doing from April to June. I think there was a big panic with a lot of them. A lot of the fractional markets are still, and we talked about like collectible and we've talked to Ezra before. He would say, one of the things that they need to improve is the liquidity, right? They need more people to kind of transact on the platform on a regular basis. And
he would kill me if I didn't point out that they've announced this week that they are trying to increase liquidity by bringing in a bidding program in between, so you can increase liquidity and have more people involved.
To their credit, 100%. Like they're doing something about it, right? They're working on it, right? And it's this highly regulated market that they've worked really hard to create. Yeah. It's very structured. It's a trustable platform that they have. But still, right, it's got its challenges. It's a new market. People are still getting used to it, this idea of fractional. And so you saw that. You did see the correlation, like Bitcoin crashed, like it reached a high of 67,000. Just right now, it's back up to like 18, 19K. And so you really saw that across other markets. Now, going back to what we were talking about before, with cards, the one steady or the one area that really didn't experience that broadly was the vintage market, which was really interesting.
Yes.
I think, you and I, we talked a little bit about, you're bullish on the vintage market. I'm also bullish on it. Not so bullish in the short term. And the reason for that is because of the influx of supply that you're going to see, like the cards that have been graded. They're going to come out in the market, over the next couple of months, I believe. And so that'll tamper down the growth for a little while, but there's only so many of those cards, right? Like they're older cards. They're way scarcer than any of the modern products that are being created. Mass products are being created. And so it was a really interesting niche there when compared to the rest of the card market and other markets in general.
Well, I think you and I agree on the fact that vintage is, here's my disclaimer. Don't listen to anything I say. Nothing I say means anything. Don't buy anything on my advice. So generally, vintage to me is when I work as a private broker and I work with clients. I mean, that's my mutual fund. That's my safe space. It's not for a quick flip. So to your point, whether or not I'm bullish short term versus long term, I think we're both bullish moving forward with vintage. And to that point, you and I probably both have been for a couple of years. If we were to study the numbers, it's been pretty consistent. But the rest of the market is really what's changed. It's almost like vintage kind of stayed the same, and everything else fell down, and everybody looked and said, who's standing? So it's not that vintage rose so much. It's really, I think, everything around it just fell that low. And so that's one of the things I see, because as I'm buying and selling vintage, the prices, depending on the card and the player, and it differentiates tremendously right now. Some of them have either not changed at all, or they're 50% of their value. It's not. I can't figure out the consistency. So I am a little bit concerned from the macro standpoint, but as far as 2023, I am bullish on a couple areas. The vintage card market, just for safety, but heavily in tickets and memorabilia. Once again, just on scarcity and the amount of product that could come to market to excite people.
So, I went to I'm in New York, and
I don't hold that against you, by the way.
Well, don't hold this against me. I'm a Mets fan as well. I'm wearing the
that's a lot better, actually.
That's a lot better? Okay.
I'm an Orioles fan, so as long as you're not in the AL East, you got Buck Showalter, we're good.
There we go. And misery loves company, right? So
exactly.
For the most part, right?
Exactly.
But so I went to the National this year because it was in Atlantic City. It was a quick, nice drive there and a quick little drive. And I just went there looking for cards, and I ran into this ticket stubs from from Game 6 1986 World Series.
Oh, yep.
And I was like, okay, let me look at that. Hey, I asked the vendor, can I hold it? And he had Game 6 and Game 7, and I just, I'm a small time collector, man. I'm not a big spender,
and this is the Buckner game, if in case people and the clinching game after that, if you're not familiar.
Game 6 and Game 7, last World Series that the Mets won. Game 6 is the Buckner game, and when I held the ticket, and I was kind of very skeptical of ticket, but when I held that ticket, I got chills, man. I got chills because that ticket, I'm presuming, was at that game, and I got to I almost felt like the energy. I know it sounds weird, but I almost felt like the energy transferred.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I didn't get it until I saw that, and I had to buy it. So I could only buy one. I bought the Game 6 ticket because it's iconic. Even though Game 7 was the clinching game, I went back kicking myself like a couple weeks ago. Man, I should have just bought the Game 7. But in any case, to your point about tickets, I think there definitely is a market. When they first came out, I didn't understand the debut, Tiger Woods' debut or Michael Jordan's debut, and but I kind of changed my tune once after the National, once I bought my own ticket, my own ticket stub. It's right there in the background. I don't know if you can see it right there.
I pull some. Yeah, no, I love tickets.
Yeah.
And I have found that I am more emotional with tickets.
Mm-hmm.
Cards, okay. I can go through cards for something. I can smell cardboard all day. I can go through monster boxes, of players that are worth nothing all day and have a thrill. Tickets, I either want to own a ticket from a game I was at, that has that direct, or that has an emotional connection to me elsewhere. So if the Orioles clinched their first World Series in '66, I have the clinching game to that. That ties to me personally. I think when you talk about game used memorabilia in that market, or you talk about tickets, I think a lot of that is that connection where it's slightly more personal than the card. Would you?
I 100% agree with you. So I've got when it comes to memorabilia, right? I mean, and we could talk economics of it all, and that's kind of what I'm used to talking about, the scarcity of it all, because when it comes down to it, we got to think about that a little bit. But
you do, because this is not Fanatics printing game used shoes,
right?
I mean, there's a limit, even if they change every quarter. I don't care how much they try to manipulate it; it's still going to be a very finite number.
Yeah, I mean, you really have to take a look at to get a real idea of how many cards there are, right, of a particular player. And you take a look at the PSA SGC reports, and you really get a feel for how many cards there really are. So I was looking at Tom Seaver rookie card, and in just the reports themselves, there's already upwards of 10,000, between all the grades, which is pretty high. That's a high supply, and that's just the ones that have been graded. Now you're talking.
That was my point exactly. Yep.
And so it makes you think. what should I buy here? Is it, and that's a personal decision, right? That's a budget decision. That's what you want to do with your collection and everything. But you don't really have that decision when it comes to a piece of memorabilia, right? When you're talking about a Tom Seaver game used, I don't know, glove or cap or whatever.
Right.
Man, I can't think there will never be 10,000 of those, right? Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, you made me just think of something, because for so long, when you talk about the older players, I'm thinking more of the modern, but when you talk about vintage memorabilia, especially back then, there was no incentive to hold on to stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no real secondary market to go out the back door with the clubhouse guy. I mean, it just wasn't anything like it, became in later years. So, the vintage memorabilia, maybe I should start talking about separate from modern memorabilia.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's even scarcer. I mean, who knows where some of that stuff is, right? But it also made me think this, and this is kind of when we talk vintage, right? To me, and this is part of the article as well that we're talking about. I think we're talking about baseball essentially, right?
It tends to be the 900-pound vintage gorilla.
Yeah, it really does. And I'm more of a I love vintage baseball, but I'm more of an actually vintage football collector. Just because there's something about the football cards that I love. Nope. But I think part of that is the way that baseball, treasures its history. And I'm not saying that the other leagues don't, like 100% they do, but
Ken Burns picked baseball for a reason. He didn't pick ice hockey.
He didn't pick, right. But and that's the thing, like,
and guys, please don't DM me, ice hockey people. I please. Yeah, it was a joke.
No, I think if you really explore the history of ice hockey, if you really like, and I know I'm sure there've been a lot of documentaries, it would be fascinating. But baseball really honors its heroes, right? Yes. Jackie Robinson's, the Hank Aaron's, Babe Ruth is a hero to me. Babe Ruth, the Clementes, and
well, there's a Paul Bunyan-esque to these guys. For some reason, I think football players don't seem as mythical.
Right.
I mean, is that?
So, to me, like the most famous vintage, right, player might be, or a handful, it might be like Jim Thorpe. And that was really before the NFL really was.
And as far as cards go, you're talking about what, a 33 Sport Kings, and
right, yeah.
I mean, he was known not just for football. The reason Jim Thorpe is Jim Thorpe is because he played 28 sports and was the best at all of them.
Yeah.
So I love that point.
Olympic gold medalist, everything, yeah. And then after him might be like, Red Grange, right? Bronco Nagurski. But going back to, like, I don't think the NFL really celebrates that the way that that baseball does. So
there's no candy bar called Bronco Nagurski. I mean, it's just there'd be for some reason there'd be a lot of nougat. I don't know why. It just sounds nougaty.
Yeah. What would that consist of? What would a Bronco Nagurski have? Some.
I don't know, but I don't think I would want to eat it for some reason.
I feel like a Bronco Nagurski.
I think it would taste like a locker room. No, but that's an excellent point. I had not thought about the mythical nature of the football player. And maybe, listen, I'm from Baltimore, so we have Johnny Unitas, and he's the exception to the rule because he's the greatest quarterback ever. But other than Johnny Unitas, there's not a lot of them. I mean, Jim Brown and Johnny Unitas, I usually look at the two.
Yeah, I mean, listen, 100%. There are these legendary football players, and I think the closest that we have to Ken Burns, you mentioned Ken Burns, is NFL Films, right? And
John Facenda, yep.
And what they did, and that's where I grew up watching, and I think that's why I'm so tied to these vintage football cards. But even though that's my experience, like, I still feel like they lack the way that the league lacks the way that the MLB doesn't.
Well, and this, the history of the cards, the companies, the printing was also all different. Yeah, they just had different trajectories in how they were made, when they were made, how they were distributed, the popularity of the sports at the time, the total printing numbers. I mean, there's just, and it's not like it is today. And I don't think people realize that football was a distant second in this country, and the amount of attention it got from the card companies. was a distant second. So once again, which is great for scarcity and a lot of other reasons if you're looking to collect and have a profitable item. But it does make it on some guys, I mean, hard to find, good condition cards of a lot of these legends you're talking about.
Yeah, you mentioned like Thorpe with the Nagurski with the 33 set. And also, and I don't want to go too far into it, but like a lot of, the NFL was desegregated early on, unlike MLB, right? And so a lot of these older pioneers like Fritz Pollard, Paul Robeson, right? These guys that
for those of you who don't know, it's not just an alliance; it was a person.
It was an actual person, brilliant guy, brilliant athlete.
Great story.
But there's no cards of it. There's no they don't have cards because they didn't make them. They didn't include them. So now you fast forward and this is one of the things, like 48 Bowman, right? Mm-hmm. Has Kenny Washington and Bob Manning. That's the first time that and then there's a couple other cards before that, but those are the main releases. And those are, the first appearances of the, African American football players. But there's a history missing there in a way that baseball isn't, right? Baseball has all these other sets.
Well, I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to say other than the fact that they completely ignored the Negro Leagues, other than that, yes. Yeah, absolutely. Which is a personal separate conversation.
Yes.
Okay, so real quick, so you got a White Sox hat on, you're a Mets fan. Who are your teams? Let's talk about the fun stuff. When did you grow up? What sports? What teams?
So this is great. I'm from Miami.
Oh, my whole family's from down there.
From South Florida, yeah. So
my mother went to Coral Gables High and grew up in Kendall area.
Awesome, yeah. I'm from Kendall.
My brother went to the U.
Went to the U. So all right, man. Hey, this is perfect. I grew up more than anything, and to this day, a Miami Hurricane fan.
Okay.
That because of the football team and the baseball team was also great for a long time now. But Canes fan through and through. And I grew up watching New York sports teams down in Miami because we had a station down there, WORTV. And so that's how I became a New York Mets fan. Before the Marlins came on, it was like I started watching baseball a year or two before the Marlins, but I'm a loyal kind of sports fan, so I stayed loyal to the Mets. I still cheered for the Marlins, but I stayed loyal for the Mets, even though they were horrible at that time. This is like early '90s.
I think you're a closet Charlie Huff PC.
Charlie
collector.
Huff.
I think that's your secret PC. You can admit it if you want.
Charlie Huff is a legend, man. He's a Marlins legend. Him and
Jeff
Brett
Cohen.
Barbery. You remember Orestes?
Yes.
Destrada, yeah,
Absolutely. I was at the third Marlins game ever.
Were you? Okay.
It means nothing. Talk about arbitrary numbers. I just picked it. I was at number 3. I didn't save my ticket. Did
you become a Benito Santiago fan? I don't know. Did you know?
I loved him because, first of all, okay, don't go down Benito Santiago with that. Okay, 34-game rookie hitting streak.
Okay,
am I correct on that? I believe so. And if I'm remembering correctly, he could throw from his knees,
yes, without
having to get out of the crouch.
The guy had an arm.
Yeah, so I double check. I believe it was a 34-game consecutive hitting streak. And for a guy who was not known to be a contact hitter, this is killing me.
I just loved his look, man. His hustle, the way he would stand at the plate. He kind of had like this like old school stance,
and those colors were fantastic.
I think Benito Santiago hit the first home run in Marlins history. I might be incorrect with that.
We've gone so off the rails. I am loving this. No, I'm literally I'm looking this up while we're talking. He was inducted into the Padres Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he was big time, great defensive catcher.
And he hit safely in 34 consecutive games by a rookie.
Well,
Yep.
All-Star. I'm sure he made a couple of All-Star games.
Yeah, no, I mean he was 5-time All-Star. Yeah, NL Rookie of the Year, 3-time Gold Glove, 4-time Silver Slugger. All right, we got to start getting Benito Santiago a little bit of love with the veterans.
A little bit of love, right? Yeah, a little bit of love. Where is he?
I think we got to go to eBay and get this pump and dump going on Benito Santiago. Anyway, so that's cool. So you stayed with the New York teams.
The New York teams, yeah, except for basketball. There I grew up like most kids, a Bulls fan. So love the Bulls.
Not a Heat fan.
I did grow up with those Heat fans, with a Heat fan. But once I watched Jordan in the first finals, I was hooked.
Yeah.
When he won the first title against the Lakers. But Miami basketball has an interesting history, and I admit I jumped on the bandwagon when Wade came on, and they had that whole thing, and then when LeBron came, that was a whole nother beast. That was a whole nother animal,
Oh, my grandmother, may she rest in peace, would go to bed every night to Heat games. She nothing that she loved more than watching her Heat. I would get a call in the morning on what are they doing? What, they can't rebound, they can't pass.
you know what really on TV what drew me a lot to the Heat games was the game announcers. One of them was Dr. Jack Ramsey.
Oh, the legend,
the legend, and his voice was so like transfixing, and I remember there was a guy named Vashawn Leonard. Okay, and every time Vashawn would make a 3-pointer, Dr. Ramsey would go Leonard, and it was just like, man, it was must watch TV in Miami, for a while there, and the guy was just such a great announcer. It was entertaining. It was just so entertaining. So that's where I'm from, man, Miami. That's where I'm from, but living in New York now. So.
Well, you've also reinforced my other theory is nobody can do what they do in this industry if you don't have passion. If you don't have a real love for it, this is not an industry to come into and learn to suck it up and figure out how to do your job. So real quick, I'm dying to know. You've done lots of interviews with lots of different types of investments. You've had to learn a little bit about a lot of things that I can't even imagine. If you don't want to say, I don't want to put you on the spot. What's the weirdest thing you've heard people investing in?
The weirdest thing I've heard people investing in. Wow.
And I'll throw out there Andre the Giant's Jock strap off a collectible.
Which I'm a shareholder, by the way.
Of the Jock strap?
Of the Jock strap, yeah.
It's a large purchase.
It's got like 10 shares. But man, like what is the weirdest thing that when we have the podcast guests on alts, they're pretty savvy business people, so it's kind of intimidating. I'm interviewing these CEOs of these multi-million-dollar companies in some cases, or talking to experts in certain fields. We talked about an expert in Pokemon, an expert in street art. Even experts in wine, whiskey, and how they approach it, and it's really, really fascinating how much they know, and how they kind of analyze whatever market that they're into. So as far as the weirdest, I wouldn't say it was so much weird. I mean, definitely Andre the Giant jockstrap takes the cake. I would say that the most kind of interesting or out there would be he's a collector. He's not really so much an investor, but he's a collector in meteorites. And
I don't know if that's cool or weird.
It's 100% cool, man. So he, he's a lifelong meteorite collector, or not a lifelong, but he's been doing it for about a good 20 years. And that's not his like full-time job, right? Like, but the knowledge that he has, the passion, like you mentioned, that he has for meteorites.
Right.
He's talking about how, meteorites influenced the potentially influenced the beginning of life on Earth, and populated it with certain amino acids, and was able to get the evolution kind of kickstarted billions of years ago. And then he talks about all these different kind of meteorites and where you can find meteorites, and how people are sourcing the meteorites.
Wow, my whole life feels worthless at this point. I mean, I'm sitting here worried about the 57 top set, and this guy's solving the secrets to humanity.
The secret, oh man, he really is. You talk to him, and you see that passion, and so his name is Mendy, and Mendy's he was a guest on the podcast twice. And the thing is, he never did it. Here's the thing, and this is how we can kind of relate it to collecting, right? He never really did it for to make a profit. You know, he never did it to get rich or to make money. He did it because he loved it. And yeah, you know, he could turn some things around and flip some things so he can buy a better meteorite or a rare meteorite. But that's not his end game, right? Like, that's not the end goal.
I'm not laughing at what you're saying. I'm laughing at the fact that I would not even know how to buy or sell meteorites should I need to. I just want to know if I ever need to buy or sell a meteorite, you're going to have to hook me up with this guy, because I don't think it's an eBay item.
It's not you can actually, and here's the crazy thing, you can actually forge meteorites, right? Yeah.
Ryan Nolan's second book.
50 fake meteorites.
Right. How to tell when your rock is not from outer space.
Oh man.
That's crazy.
Yeah, for real.
So okay, well that's fantastic. That's awesome. Yeah. And I hope the passion is as pure and as wonderful with the meteorites as we are, you know, with sports and cards and memorabilia. Because that's, I just love hearing stories like that.
Did we talk about vintage cards enough here? I feel like we've talked about, you know, maybe
we've talked. We did a lot of vintage cards.
All right.
What's your favorite vintage card?
So, you know,
give me your Mount Rushmore, because we've had a debate on this. Your Mount Rushmore of vintage cards.
Yeah. So, man, that's okay. So there's really three cards that I'm eyeing right now, and I want to talk to you about. This is kind of one of the things I brought up. I found that a lot of collectors, and you know, maybe you think I'm, you know, maybe you got the opposite view. I feel like a lot of collectors that have been in for a couple of years are looking to kind of consolidate, and they're looking to buy maybe nicer cards now, like higher graded cards is what I mean by that.
I will say that I have clients calling me to upgrade and consolidate their collection. Absolutely.
And I think we're going to see a lot of that in 2023. I think you're seeing people, you know, generally speaking, of course, like holding off on buying those PSA SGCs 2s, 3s, and 4s, and saving like an extra month or two to them, or whatever, to get to the 6 or the 7. Because that's kind of where I find myself right now.
I think it's different for every person. Just, I'm going to say respectfully, within each person's budget, I think they're going to go to the best they can afford.
Yeah.
And so, you know, whether that's a 4 for somebody or an 8 for somebody else, I agree with you that I think people are looking, well, it gets back to population and scarcity. In theory, you know, in vintage, the higher grade is much more scarce, and that holds true 99.9% of the time. So yeah, to your point, I think they're going for more scarcity.
Yep. Yeah. That's where I find myself. Exactly. Like, you know, getting that card that I really like, that I'm really looking for, and buying it in as nice of a condition as I can. Right. So I got 3 cards that I'm really looking for. I don't know when I'm going to buy them. I have no idea, but the 71 Topps Clemente. You got one back, you know.
I was trying to see if I still have one. I only have my 69 within reach.
Yeah, the 69. Okay, so another Clemente, his rookie, the 55 Topps.
Great card.
And then I love the 50 Bowman Jackie Robinson that I'm looking to get in a certain.
I'm looking for one.
You look.
I literally just 2 days ago, they made fun of me. I did a thing for my car. I have a client looking for a 50 Bowman Jackie in like a PSA 3 or 4.
Yeah.
If anybody has one, please reach out. I am looking for one. If it happens to be in Canada, that would be more helpful. But yeah, I am looking for one. This is all true. Horacio, I couldn't make this up.
So you're brokering a deal for someone in Canada?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Okay.
Well, I mean, you know, I do need to find the card, or there will be no deal to broker. But no, I mean, very nice guy, and he's doing exactly what you talked about. He's got a lot of great cards, Koufax rookie, Banks rookie. I mean, you know, there's some nice stuff, but he's trying to consolidate into kind of that one Grail card for himself. Yeah,
that 3, you know, 3.5, because I'm looking at it. And you're talking somewhere between 3 to 3.5K, maybe around there. I don't know, you know.
And if he goes for a 4, it could double.
It could double, right? And that's kind of where then you've got a different tier. So, but I love the 50 Bowman, man. I mean, the illustration of it, him kind of like holding that bat. He's got like that serious look. With Clemente, the reason I like the 71 and some of his other cards is Clemente was not really a smiley kind of guy, So like his 55 rookie, he's all smiling, and I'm like, that's not really Clemente. Clemente is like a serious kind of somewhat off-putting kind of guy, and that's just who he was.
Well, first of all, he was a good-looking guy, so I do think that a pose for him wasn't the worst thing ever. But he should have been an in-action guy. They just didn't do in-action shots because everybody had to be painted, or eventually photographed. But he was somebody that if they could have captured a throw from right field, or him going first to third in a photograph, with the hat flying, and everything, would have been very cool for more of his cards.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of his cards are kind of portraits, and also I this is nerding out now with cards, but my little pet peeve, and I know other people I like to see his name, Roberto Clemente.
Not Bob.
I don't like not Bob.
You don't think when his parents named him they said, yeah, we want to go with Bob.
I just don't get it. Like why did the Topps put Bob all the time? For all those years, I don't know. I mean,
because you do know, Horatio, because they chose to anglicize it because it sold better, and that's a shame.
Yeah,
and we can look back through the lens of history and say, you know what, not a great decision.
Not a great decision. Yeah. I mean, that's not Bob Clemente, man.
And they would do fronts and backs different sometimes. I mean, it was so obviously like we don't know what to do with this. And it made everybody uncomfortable, clearly at Topps, which is that's their problem. They can deal with it. But yeah, they should have, and it wasn't just Roberto, to be fair. I'm a little bit sore on this because a lot of players were anglicized.
Yeah. This is great, man. I'm with you, man. I'm with you, Danny. So
yeah. And while we're on it, also when you go back and you read newspaper articles from the time, the quotes were done a lot differently, and they were not done always with the intention of the message that the player was trying to get across. Too often they were done as a literal translation, which was not the point of the message that the player, who was speaking in a second language, by the way, as I can barely speak in one language.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just want to make sure people know that when they read those, to look at it through the lens of history.
And I think a lot of great sports writers were also guilty of that. I mean, I don't know if
well, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, even like Myron Cope, who covered him, the great, he's a Pittsburgh sports writer and broadcaster. He was guilty of it, and I think he regretted it. He saw that.
What's funny, I just checked the PSA label to see if they matched the Bob, and they did. I wonder if they have to do that because the card says that, or if they get a choice along.
I think so. It's Bob Clemente.
Sure. All right. In that case, do I call you Hank or that's ridiculous. Yeah, come on. All right.
So that's another. There you go. That's another, right? I don't know, Hank Aaron, Henry Aaron. I mean, what are we going to call him? I don't know if Henry is just Hank is a traditional nickname for Henry, obviously, so it's a little bit different, I guess. But I don't know. You could look at it from a different lens as well.
He got called a lot of things. Let's be
okay. Yeah,
I used to work for the Braves. I was lucky enough to meet Mr. Aaron. One of the great moments of my life. There's very few people I've met that I've been awestruck. But he was a tough guy.
Yeah. 100%. Also, one of my heroes. I mean, I got another little SGC1 Hank Aaron up there. I don't know if you see it.
What year?
Back there, right there. You see right there, right above there.
My eyes aren't that good. What year is it?
55.
Ooh.
55. SGC1, they got that.
Hank Aaron. Oh, that's pretty.
Yeah, love it. It's my one, and that's kind of what I'm like, well,
You know what, though? That's all that matters.
I love it. It's a beautiful card.
Well, that's why collecting is so individual. Yeah. I mean, it's such a personal thing. I mean, I'm sitting here next to me. I've got a Deckel Brooks Robinson next to my Trinity Rodman auto.
Trinity Rodman.
So, this is what being a collector is about, is having, your Brooks Robinson, Deckel border, right next to your Trinity Rodman Auto NWSL cards. So
who's your, you're an Orioles fan. Who's number one? Who's number one? Do you have a number one?
Cards or players?
Collecting memorabilia.
Well, to me, the find of the News American Babe Ruth.
Okay, yeah.
The one we talked about earlier. I that now propels to me, not just in Baltimore, but in cards. I now think that card should be thought of as much as the Wagner.
As much as
I think once again, if you look at population, you look at distribution, you look at scarcity, it's lower than Wagner on everything. And you're talking about Babe Ruth. Mm-hmm. So to me, that one card, because it's his only card in a Baltimore uniform. So that has a very special place for me. 57 Topps gave the 57 Topps was the Brooks Robinson rookie. It was the Frank Robinson rookie with the Reds, but he's obviously one of the Oriole statues outside of Oriole Park. Yeah. And it happened to be the first year of the standardized card. So I love that set for a lot of reasons. But of my generation, I mean, it was Eddie and Cal.
Eddie and Cal, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I grew up on, was them back to back in the middle of the lineup. They're always in contention for MVPs, competitive teams, and it was just a different thing, when I was younger. I had those Hall of Famers in the lineup.
I remember Eddie Murray with the Mets just being like, "What am I doing here?" Towards the end of his career.
Yeah, no, I think I'm glad he got back to Baltimore at the end of his career. I'm glad he got his 500th with the Orioles. Yeah. So what else have I missed? Have we?
I could, whatever, Danny. If we got off the rails too much,
no, I don't believe in off the rails. That's why I do my own show.
There.
Well, you're definitely going to have to get invited back another time, because you and I can clearly do a 3-hour segment, and I got to tell you, I am so glad I reached out, because this has been really my treat to just listen to you talk and your perspective, and to have a little bit of fun. And I think being around the same generation, growing up, and the same guys that we watch play. This has been as entertaining, as much fun as I've had in a while. So thank you, Horacio.
I appreciate that, and I thank you for having me on, man. It was a blast. It's a blast. It was a blast. Yeah, we could continue talking about whatever, but really appreciate it. I know I host the podcast, and I really enjoy.
Well, tell everybody where to find you.
Sure. Yeah. So my Twitter handle is @Murfreeman. That's kind of I created that a long time ago, and I just never changed it. But that's kind of my Twitter handle, and you can check me out. I write a couple articles a month for Sports Collectors Daily, and also for alts.co. You'll find some stuff that I post on my Twitter handle there. So that's really where I'm at.
And I will vouch for the fact that it is all entertaining. So, Horacio, thank you. I'm going to put you in the green room. Enjoy the blue M&Ms. I'll be with you in a second. And to everybody else, thank you for another episode of Sports Ball. I don't believe in outros, so see you next time.